I want to talk about three things. I want to talk about 21st century government. I want to talk about mashups, and I want to talk about values. So let me start with 21st century government, but let me take a step back and talk about 20th century government. We all know it. Who has a driver's license? So the DMV is 20th century government, right? It's 9 to 5. They've forgotten why they're there, but they're still there, and people line up, and they go through the process. There have been efforts to try to fix it, and sometimes it's gotten 5% better or maybe 10% better than it. I mean, the appointments was a big step forward, right? It was a revolution. You could make an appointment. This was something that they learned from the private sector about 75 years later. And that's 20th century government. We make fun of it now, but when it started, it was incredible. Because before 20th century government, poor people were at the mercy of the Darwinian, Dickinsonian market, right? It was, Dickens said, "It's every man for himself," cried the elephant as he danced among the chickens. So think of that image, right? The vast majority of people were the chickens, and the great corporate behemoths were the elephants. And until 20th century government stepped in with public education, with public health departments, with public libraries, and yes, even the regulation that led to licensing drivers. It took from the chaos and the disasters of untrammeled capitalism. 20th century was an antidote. Government was an antidote to that. It was creating public value. It was protecting the most vulnerable people in our society and giving other people opportunities to become middle class and beyond. So 20th century government was driven by true values. But 100 years later, we need to revive that. We need to rekindle that. We need to reinvent that. And that's why we're here tonight to talk about 21st century government. 21st century government isn't like 5% better than 20th century government. It's 10x better. It's starting over again, not from scratch, but from that bedrock of values. Why are we here? Why do we exist? We exist because there's 350 million Americans, and every single one of them deserves respect and dignity and basic human rights. And government isn't here to get in the way of business. It isn't to create red tape. It's to create public value. It's to be responsive to the needs of people in America today. Not 100 years ago, not 150 years ago, in response to the people and their needs today. Today, tonight, 45,000 Angelenos will be outdoors, will not have a place to call home, will be homeless. In our country, that's unacceptable. They're not only a nuisance and a danger to themselves, but they are a blight on our conscience and a danger to our community. You cannot live 10 or 20 years outdoors and not become mentally ill and not live a life that is without the dignity and without the basic human rights that should be the birthright of every American. And we haven't figured out how to solve that problem. But we have solved other problems. Fire departments were invented because America in the 19th century was made out of wood, and we used fire for fuel and to heat our homes and our factories and to power our economy. So we had a lot of fires. Last year in Santa Monica, we had 47 fires, right? The building codes we put into place, the public education we've put into place, the inspections we do of businesses and of residents. It's largely abolished the problem of fire. And though our fire department only went on 47 fire calls last year, our fire department went on 2,704 homeless distress calls. 2,704 times someone called 911 and said, "There's a man down. Can you send somebody out here? Because he might be bleeding, he might be dead, he might be in distress, might be having a heart attack. Can you send someone?" And we sent out a fire truck. 4 very well paid, very well trained, very expert people who arrived on the scene and in 75% of the cases said, "Nothing we can do." Because there's nothing on a fire truck for public inebriation. There's nothing on a fire truck for chronic emphysema. There's nothing on a fire truck for mental illness. So in the Swiss Army knife of our fire trucks and the incredible training we give to our firefighters, we didn't have a tool in 75% of those 2,700 cases. That's what we've got to invent. That's 21st century government. We got a 21st century problem. We need a serious 21st century answer to that. And that's why we're here tonight. That's the second theme I want to talk about, is mashups. When I was growing up, there was a stand across the street from City Hall in LA. It sold the world's only kosher burrito. And it was owned by a Korean immigrant family. And in the years since I was a teenager and discovered the kosher burrito, Los Angeles has become the epicenter of cultural mashups on the planet, right? This is the place where, whether it's food, whether it's language, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's technology, whether it's education, the world is coming here and finding fusion and synthesis like no place else on the planet. This is the most interesting place to be on the planet because of that mashup. And what we're talking about tonight is the mashup of tech and government, right? Two worlds that sometimes are suspicious and isolated from each other. It's like, do we even speak the same language? What we've been doing over the last year is that mashup, figuring out how to put together a kosher burrito, figuring out how to mesh together the impatience, the sense of urgency, the sense of dynamism that the tech sector brings, which is it's internet time, right? We never sleep. We constantly looking for new ways of doing things, the creative destruction, the constant reinvention, the fact that if this isn't brand new in a year, it sucks. The reality of that world mashed with the legacy of 20th century government, right? Trying, the difference between ordering on Amazon and getting a building permit, right? On Amazon, it's Saturday night, it's 10 o'clock at night, you decide there's something you want to buy those sunglasses because you thought they were very cool. And so you type in Amazon, you type in Ray-Ban, you find the picture. In 3 clicks, it's on its way, and if you pay extra, it'll be there at your door on Sunday, delivered. 10 o'clock, you decide, I think I'll figure out how to get a building permit, right? 20 minutes later, you might find the right website and download a PDF and fill it out by hand and fax it in, and then we'll call you and make an appointment, and then you'll come down and sit on one of those hard benches in our lobby, and we'll call your number, and then we'll give you an answer that 2 weeks later is going to change. That's not the way to do business in the 21st century. And we're about changing that. We're about adopting the dynamism and the impatience and the drive to be responsive government. Not because we're competing with Amazon for your dollars, but we're competing with Amazon for your trust. Because unlike Amazon, you own us. You don't pay for us to give you a service. We're not a vending machine. We are your government. 241 years ago, a bunch of white guys gathered in Independence Hall in Philadelphia decided for the first time that we were going to experiment with self-government at the continental scale. Right? There had been experiments with cities here and there, along from Athens to Florence, but no one had talked about self-government at a continental scale. And they wrote about the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they invented the United States of America. And it's not a perfect country, but it has done more to unleash the liberation of the human spirit than any other experiment in the last 241 years. And we're still working on a more perfect union. And so what 21st century government is about, values. It is about those eternal values of self-government. We can do better. We can do better than the DMV. We do better than the DMV every day at Santa Monica City Hall. But we are not satisfied. We want to adopt the impatience and the dynamism of the tech sector. We want to innovate. We want to deliver real quality services, and we want to solve real serious problems. We can't solve the problem of homelessness in Los Angeles County in 8.3 square miles. But we are damn sure we're going to do our part. We can't solve the regional housing crisis in 227 acres of our downtown, but we're damn sure we're going to do our part. We can't reinvent mobility for the planet, but in this city, having already booked 1 million miles on Southern California's first bike share program, carrying 16 million passengers a year on our Big Blue bus, changing the way people get around as pedestrians so they're safer and more numerous in our community, we are going to be a model of new mobility for the planet. We're not going to solve the problems of the planet here in our town, but we're going to show the way toward solving the problems of the planet. This is the first time in human history that a majority of the world's people live in cities. That is an incredibly profound transformation. America passed that demarcation line back in the census of 1920. That was the first time. The year before my father was born was the first time that a majority of Americans lived in cities. Before that, a majority of Americans were farmers, right? My dad was born into the first era in which a majority of Americans lived in urban areas. Well, that's happening now at a pace and a scale that dwarfs the transformation of America in the 20th century. In China, in 15 years, they are going to build cities, they're going to expand their cities by 250 million people. That is like taking every single suburb and city in America and building it from scratch in 15 years. Not just the buildings, not just the roads, not just the sewers and the streetlights, but training all the cops and equipping all the schools and creating all the hospitals. All of that in 15 years. Now they're going to screw up part of that because you can't do it that fast. No one in human history has ever tried to do something at that scale and that speed. The last time it happened was 100 years ago when Chicago went from 30,000 people to 1 million people in 30 years. Nothing had ever happened on the planet at that speed and that scale. Well, Shenzhen, in the last 30 years, has gone from 30,000 people to 11 million people in 30 years. So they don't have the rule of law. They don't have a democracy. They don't have the legacy of freedom that we've built over the last 241 years. So if we can't show the way here in our 8.3 square miles, what hope is there for Shenzhen? What hope is there for Jakarta? What hope is there for Nairobi? What hope is there for the 3 billion people on the planet that now live in cities if we can't show the way to 21st century government right here in Santa Monica, California? We can be a model. We cannot solve all of the problems of the planet in 8.3 square miles, but we can be a beacon. Just like the Statue of Liberty has inspired people all over the world since she lifted her lamp beside the Golden Door and welcomed the huddled masses yearning to breathe free. We can be a beacon to the world. We want you to partner and mash up with us and together create 21st century government. We challenge you to take up that opportunity. We will work with you. We will learn from you. We will teach you. We will figure out together, based upon the values of integrity and public spirit and public service, how to solve problems, how to make 21st century government. We'll do it together. It starts tonight. Thank you for coming.